And welcome to Film Fighters, a film discussion podcast coming to you from the luxurious studios of Radio Titans in Los Angeles. I'm Carl Kozlowski, and I am a film critic for, among other places, the Pasadena Weekly newspaper. And with me are two other passionate film buff friends of mine that have their own expertise in film. First up is...
Hey guys, I'm Zoe Hewitt. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at RealZoeHewitt. I'm also a film critic. I write on various topics for Variety magazine as well as others. And I also do a weekly movie review show that's syndicated on multiple sites where I focus on themes and symbolism in movies.
And also with us is my good friend Joe Black.
Hey, I'm Joe Black. I'm an independent filmmaker. I've made 12 feature films, and I've been a film fan my entire life, a junkie, if you will. So
awesome. So today we are talking about the new last week movie, Thor-Ragnarok, which set all sorts of records, or came close at least, with a $121 million opening weekend. That was way bigger than the each of the prior Thor movies in the trilogy. And, there's a lot of, hype out there that, oh, wow, they really must know what they're doing, but...
It's the highest rated comic book movie of all time now, right? On Rotten Tomatoes, it has the highest rating.
It is? Yeah. What is the rating?
It's like a 93.
That's the highest?
Yeah.
93? What about Avengers? I thought
it's above Avengers, yeah.
Wow.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
I kind of liked it, but I wouldn't put it above Avengers, for crying out loud. I'll let you guys... what'd you think of it first off, before we get into some deeper issues with it?
I thought it was fun. I'm a big fan of popcorn flicks. I like the superhero genre in general, although admittedly lately I have been a little bit suffering from superhero fatigue. And as much as I like... Well, I wouldn't say Thor, but really it's more as much as I like Chris Hemsworth. I have not been a fan of the Thor movies in particular, but I loved this one. I thought it was just a lot of fun. I liked the humor. I thought it was easy to watch. And one of the things that also stood out to me in particular is that I think a lot of times when there are sort of futuristic worlds or other worlds where there's definitely a lot of color saturation in particular, that sometimes they can be difficult to watch. I just think that they wind up putting so much on screen it becomes overwhelming. And I thought that this was done really well. Like when they're on Sakaar, there's definitely a lot happening, but it wasn't overwhelming to look at. So I enjoyed it.
I thought, I'll just say real quick, because I know Joe has probably the most to say about this, but I thought it was funny. I didn't like the, and it was trying to go for that, which Joe is raising might be a problem actually, but the first Thor movie I wasn't that impressed with. It's probably one of my least favorite ones. Definitely out of Marvel. I hate the DC movies mostly until Wonder Woman. But this the first Thor, I was like, well, this is like a little too funny. I was like surprised, and I love comedies, but I was surprised how much of it was jokey. And then I wasn't impressed with the finale. I mean, Joe mentioned when we were talking on the phone the other night that there's all he's like, well, that represents this or that, and
yeah,
there was
you're saying you didn't like that
stuff.
He fought the robot in the small town, but that's not the climax of that movie. That's like the pre-climax.
Okay,
yeah, I kind of forgot.
The first Thor, no, not funny. So dull. And like I said, I wanted to like it, and I put off watching it for a long time because I thought like I'm not into it. But then I finally saw it, and I couldn't figure out why people were into it at all. But on a sort of separate topic, if I may go tangentially for a moment, Ant-Man, can someone explain to me why people like that movie? Because that is the worst movie ever!
No,
it was pretty bad.
No. I paid to see Ant-Man more than any of the other superhero movies. That's my favorite one.
No!
Yes.
I was just about to say, the first Thor... I remember when Iron Man was coming out, the very first Iron Man, like you couldn't keep people, from getting in line to see it.
Iron Man, yeah.
And I saw it, and I thought it was okay, but Thor, I absolutely loved. I loved how like internal it was, and then I thought that the whole the climax at the end, the whole. Getting Kenneth Branagh to direct it was a stroke of genius, if you ask me, because he's somebody who takes that kind of regal theatricality seriously. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of his bread and butter, and
the first Thor.
The very first Thor. And I thought that the ending to the first Thor, the idea that he has to destroy the Bifrost, which is the bridge to the woman who changed his life to this whole new world that he's discovered that has inspired him to be a better person. He has to destroy that bridge to stop his brother, who he loves, from killing their enemies for no reason, the Frost Giants, right? And in doing that, his brother realizes that their father will never love him as much as Thor, and then he lets go of Thor's hammer and falls. I just thought it was so... Like, it was so nifty, and I thought that Rainbow Bridge was so trippy, and I loved his little friends, like the little, like, you know, like the very Errol Flynn kind of guy, you know. Like, I loved the first Thor.
But there's a but coming, isn't there?
Well, no, it still is. The first Thor is still my favorite Marvel movie. The best Marvel movie, in my opinion, is Captain America: Winter Soldier.
Oh, that was good.
But my favorite is the first Thor. When I heard that when I saw the second Thor, the first half was pretty bad. But once they stopped focusing on Natalie Portman, which is always a good thing to do if you ask me, and they started focusing more on Thor and Asgard, and then I really got into it. It almost felt like what a live action He-Man should feel like.
I like that. That's an interesting description to tie it into a live-action He-Man. I never thought of Thor as a He-Man, but you're right.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's that mix of
Yeah.
sci-fi plus kind of like mythology, you know.
Yeah.
But this one I was really looking forward to because for the first time everybody was like on the Thor train, and I was like, that's cool, you know. And my buddy is a projectionist at ArcLight, and when I went to go see it, I sat down and I messaged him. I said, "Hey, you about to project Thor in House 13?" He's like, "I am," and I'm like, "Well, I'm looking forward to admiring your handiwork." And he said, "Enjoy." I have the text as proof. He said, "Enjoy Thor," and I said, "I'm really looking forward to it." And not 30 seconds into it, I was like, "Shit, this is awful."
Wow.
Like I was really, really, really
You're talking about,
disappointed.
like, even the opening scene where he's in the cage?
Right out of the gate.
I thought that-
Before
yeah.
he even fell out of the cage, I was like, nope.
Yeah, you know, that as much as I wound up enjoying the movie, I thought that was really a weird way to start it. And I remember I was scribbling, going, "What the F is going on here?" You know, and
Well, I wasn't scribbling. I was watching.
well, I have to take notes. As
No,
I
no,
go.
I know. Well, my problem with Thor right out of the gate, with Ragnarok right out of the gate, was that it wasn't that it was full of jokes. It was that everything was a joke. Mm-hmm. Like him being in a cage was a joke. Him talking about, you know, giving us all that really poorly placed exposition about where he's been for the last two Avenger movies, you know, was a joke. Him falling out of the cage was a joke. Him being told that his homeland was being destroyed was a joke as he's like spinning around. Just, I'll spin around, see you in a second. And then having this giant CGI like god with horns, it's like this scary looking thing doing like a Family Guy riff, like, really? You doing this again? You doing this? I was just like, come on. And I was hoping the whole movie that like eventually they'd drop that they'd just get back into like telling me a real story. But that's kind of what I wanted to talk about personally about Thor. This is a spoilers thing, right? We're allowed to say like what happens in it, correct?
Yeah. So, folks, if you don't want to know, then I don't know, turn the sound off.
Yeah.
But come back, you know, once you've seen the
of
movie,
course.
come back, listen to us.
Yeah,
Right.
there you go.
You'll hear all about the discussion.
Because let me put it so you talk about superhero fatigue,
Yes,
right? Which is something that
absolutely.
we're all suffering from, I think. And you talk about how you didn't like DC until Wonder Woman, and I could argue that, like, I still don't like DC. But
I am not anti-DC for the record.
neither am I. I actually, Batman vs. Superman.
Oh, that was okay. Yeah,
Batman
that
vs.
one was
Superman
okay.
is actually my favorite superhero movie in the last, like, 15 years, actually, since Spider-Man 2.
And to be clear, I just want to say that the when I'm talking about DC movies, I'm not talking about the Dark Knight trilogy. Those are good, but I'm talking about to me at least, but I'm talking about the horrific
the DCU.
cinematic like abortions that Zack Snyder puts out with Men of Steel and whatever else crap that he touches. And I'm glad that they took Justice League from him.
Wait,
Anyway.
why don't we consider Dark Knight part of DC?
It's
Well,
not
I
the
just
DC.
mean-
He means the DC
yeah.
cinematic universe,
modern universe,
like
uh-huh.
their response to Marvel, which that's their problem to begin with. If you ask me, is that they had their own thing going. They didn't need to become Marvel, but starting with Green Lantern, like when I saw Green Lantern, I could literally hear the producers over the shoulders of the people being like, "No, more like Tony Stark. Give him a cool car, make him say witty things." So my problem with Thor was that in this movie, he loses his three best friends, right? He loses his hammer. He loses his hair. He loses his father. He loses his entire homeworld. He even loses his eye.
Yeah.
Thor loses everything.
Yeah.
Right? And the whole time we're just making it's just a joke. You know, and after 3 Thor movies, 15 Marvel movies, 10 years of our lives dedicated to this universe that they're creating, when all these major dramatic things are happening to these characters, Thor in particular, we're not supposed to feel something. You know, like after 10 years of knowing this character pretty intimately, we're not supposed to they don't want us to care is kind of the vibe that I'm getting, because I think that they've entered this weird phase where they just want to be liked. And like everything in this movie seemed designed to be a GIF or a meme or you know what I mean? It honestly to me felt like scrolling through like a fan's Tumblr page.
And maybe that's why it wound up making such a... I don't understand the critical love to make it that high, but maybe that's how it wound up making so much money, was that it was like they distilled it, they sort of market researched it maybe into, hey, how do we make this the most glib, easy thing to like possible? Maybe, do you think that was going into this, or...
I don't know. I mean, I think it would have to be. I mean, like, Jeff Goldblum is, kind of a trendy thing right now. You know what I mean? It has been kind of bubbling up the last few years, and I don't think it's a coincidence that Jeff Goldblum is in this movie.
Well, I wonder if part of why you feel that way, and I've seen comments like that a lot in various discussion boards about the movies, is because I feel like people who are more passionate about like the comic end and the stories in that way are more upset by this movie, saying like this is supposed to be, Ragnarok and all this, and it's not supposed to be so funny. Like I've seen that a lot, I feel like, and I'm admittedly not a fanboy in that way. I don't think that's meant as a derogatory term at all, and so looking at this purely as someone who, sort of floats maybe sometimes in and out of the superhero genre for that reason, I thought it was fun. But you're right, I didn't take it as like, okay, well, here are all these serious things. I took it as here's just a fun take on the movie.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I'm not opposed to like having fun or anything. Like a good example would be the first Captain America. Like, I only say that because that's the one that I can think of that I've seen the most. Where that movie's really fun. It's funny. It's got wit. It's got humor. It's got like old-fashioned romantic, adventure. But like at the end of the movie, the very last line of the first Captain America, which blew my mind, it's when he wakes up in the future, in modern day, and he runs out into Times Square, and he's surrounded by Times Square. Then S.H.I.E.L.D. shows up, and they're like, "How are you thinking, Cap? What are you thinking?" And the last line of the movie is him saying, like, "I had a date." Like you feel it. You feel that that the weight of it without compromising the fun you just had. You know what I mean? But at the end of Thor Ragnarok, it literally, his home world just got destroyed, and then he gets on the ship, and they're like, "Where are we going?" And he's like, Earth?
Well, I think that Marvel floats in and out of trying to have these deep meaning movies and trying to have fun. And of course, you can look deeply into anything and say, right, like Thor and the brothers and whatever. But I think that the Captain America movies, for instance, have a lot of like almost hit you over the head with we're trying to make a point here.
Well, yeah, especially the first two.
And so I think that this one did not have that aspect as much as well. But I don't think that like Iron Man did either. If we're going way back, I don't think they did. And I thought this reminded me a lot of Iron Man, because I thought they were trying to go back to that fun, lighthearted, like maybe like you're saying, like let's bring the whole audience and let's bring everyone in who might not normally see a superhero movie, but who's hearing like about this fun comedy.
Right. Well, I mean, I think I was told by a couple people that it's like a buddy movie. Like him and the Hulk,
right.
And so I started thinking about like buddy movies that I love, and I was thinking about like Rush Hour. Like Rush Hour is a really funny movie, like really funny, and it actually holds up 20 years later. But it holds up because there's weight, and it's funny you talk about Captain America, because when Winter Soldier came out, that blew me away. It blew me away because it was so. Like there was so much going on. They did have very heavy-handed symbolism in it. Like literally, Nick Fury talking about we have to stop the real enemy. Then it cuts to a senator walking out of a bank, and I was like, oh yes, right. But then Civil War comes out, and you're like, oh, a Captain America movie about Civil War But then, what was so weird about Civil War was that they totally took away the governmental element of it. They literally just made it another mommy issue movie. Like flat out, Iron Man says, "You killed my mom," and then punches Captain America. Right. And that was where I really turned off to Marvel in general, because I was sick and tired of adults acting like children. When in that movie, especially when they have the big, everyone's favorite airport fight scene, you know,
Yeah,
like, and
I was
they're,
going to address that, but go ahead. Yeah.
you know, but they go to stand off against each other,